everybody, Mr. Rust here with your next science lesson, and today's lesson is going to continue our study of sound, and as you can see, I'm joining you from my drum set. Today we are going to talk about some different things that make sound. We are going to discuss why they make the sounds that they do, and our focus is going to be on drums. Now there's lots of things around me right now, lots of things that make sound. We're going to talk about these a little bit, and then I am also going to take apart one of my drums so that you can see the different pieces that make it up and kind of understand where the vibrations are coming from that change the different sounds of the drum. So obviously, you know, the vibrations are mainly coming from hitting the drums with the drumsticks, but how the drums are made, how they're put together, changes the sounds that they make, kind of like the cymbals. The different sizes of cymbals that you can see here all create different sounds. The different amount of metal vibrates differently, and so it creates some different sounds, okay? So we are going to take a closer look at these in just a minute, but you can see that there are lots of things here that can be struck in different ways. I have wood blocks and cowbells. I have some different cymbals. I have a cymbal over here that has a pedal on it, so I can actually make it hit itself, right, and vibrate that way. There's a tambourine over here, and then you hit it with a stick, but it also then has pieces of metal that shake against each other to make the vibrations that then translate to your ear in sound. So we are going to go ahead and dive into this just a little bit closer and take one of these drums apart and see just how it is working inside. So let's take a look. Alright guys, welcome to the inside of my drum kit. So now you can see it from the side where I was sitting before, and you can see some of the other things that I was talking about, the cowbell, the wood blocks, and then some of the cymbals and drums from a different angle. And you can see the parts that actually get hit by the stick. Those are going to be the parts that make the sound, and those are also going to be the parts that we are disassembling here in just a second. But before we start taking a drum apart, I thought it might be fun to take a look at these drums up here that I'm pointing to with the stick. Now these change their sound without being taken apart and without doing a whole lot of extra work. I don't need a drum key to change the heads or anything. These are called rototoms, and they rotate. You can spin them around and you can change how they sound just by turning them. So check it out. I'm gonna show you a couple different sounds with them, right? All right, so that's the first one. Now I'm going to turn it a little bit. And you can hear that it sounds different. Now it's also out of tune, so it doesn't sound great. It's been a while since I've really played these a whole lot, but now I can tighten it back up and you can hear that the different size rototoms make different tones. Even without changing them, they are going to sound a little bit different. So that's one way that we can change the sound of a drum, is to have a tension piece. It changes how tight the drum head is, and it changes the sound even without taking it apart or using a drum key. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to dive into one of these drums. So I'm going to go ahead and pop one off of the rack and show you how to take it apart, the different pieces, and why the sound changes when we adjust some of the bolts that are on there, and why the drum sounds the way that it does because of those parts. So I'll be back in just a second with this drum taken off the rack and show you how to break it down and why it sounds different. Alright, so you can see that I've taken the tom off of the rack that was back here, and it's now sitting on my snare drum. I'm going to go ahead and flip it over, and you can see that there's a bottom head on it too. Now this is actually a head that I used to use on the top of it, that I switched to the bottom when I got a new drum head because it wasn't in terrible condition. But there are two heads on this drum, and that makes it sound a little bit deeper and a little bit more resonant, which means that it's a little bit more echoey inside because of that. Also, you can see me in the drum head there. So we have this plasticky surface that gives us this resonating sound. But the reason that that works is because the drum head is on there pretty tight. So we're going to go ahead and unscrew the lugs or the bolts that are around this drum, and we are going to have a chance to see exactly how this comes apart. You can hear it shifting. You can hear me unscrewing it, but also there's a little bit of a plastic stretching sound as it settles back. Or actually, it's not stretching, it's relaxing, I guess, because the drum head is loosening up. And before I take this off completely, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys hear it again. And you'll notice that now it doesn't really have any resonance. It's not echoey. It is not making a nice drum sound. It's just kind of making a thunk when I hit it. And that is because there's no tension on the head. It's not pulled tight. It's almost completely loose. And the bolts are coming out now. And you can see that it moves around now. Now, it's not entirely able to be taken off yet, but when we do take it off, I want you to notice what is inside of the drum, and you'll actually be able to see much better what the drum is made of at that point, because you're going to be able to see where right now you can't see through the drum head, but it's made of wood, and wood is a great material for drums, but it's not such a great material for drum heads. And that's because the wood helps the sound to bounce around inside of the drum, but in order to get something to vibrate, to really make a good vibration so that we can hear everything, that is what the plastic drum head is for. So now you can look inside, you can see that it's wood inside of there and doesn't have a color on it like the outside does. And you can see all the pieces holding the drum together. You can actually see where the two ends of the wood came together right there. And so it's one piece of wood wrapped around, and then there's this plastic head. This plastic head is actually double layered. So there's two pieces of plastic, thin plastic, that stretch across the top of this and make a vibration that bounces around the inside of the drum and bounces against the bottom of the drum there. And it makes that nice drum sound that we all know that drum kits make. But when it got loose, think about when the head got loose there, it just made a thunk. So there's something that happens with drums that's called tuning. And it's not like tuning an instrument where you're getting a specific note. Instead, you're getting a nice, consistent tone from the drum head. So when you hit it, you want it to make a nice drum sound. You don't want it to make a bendy sound, and you don't want it to sound like it's making 2 or 3 types of sounds at the same time. And that might sound kind of weird to you, but I can actually demonstrate that to you right now. I'm going to use this tom up here. Now, I tuned this before I started making the video, so it sounds pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. I'm going to loosen just one of these lugs, and I want you to notice what happens to the sound. It's still going to make a drum sound, but it's not going to sound the same. And you might already actually be able to see what just happened because the drum head deformed a little bit. So you can see visually that it's not going to sound right. So let's check it out. So it made it lower. It's not as echoey, and that one sounds really out of tune. But this is such a flat sound as compared to this one. Did you hear how much longer you could hear that one? So if I put this lug back into place, you can start to get the idea that it's in the right spot because the drum head starts to look right again. But now I have to check all the lugs to see if they sound the same, because if they don't sound the same, the drum head is out of tune. And this is, again, something that we use sound and producing sound to check, right? So we have, it's almost the same, but there's a little bit of something that's off in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten these up a little bit on this side because there was a change between these two. And this one's a little bit lower now. You have to listen really carefully to hear the differences. It's getting there. It's not quite right, but that's something that I have to listen to very carefully and fine tune. So the sound of the drum changes with every single little turn of the lug, and it's tightening or loosening the head to make a uniform sound, to make it sound all the same. And that's going to get you the best tone from that drum as you stretch the head around the top of the drum, or if you let it relax and loosen it a little bit off of the rim of the drum as well. So that is how the drums are making their different sounds. So when you hit the drum, it's going to sound very, very different depending on how tight or loose the drum head is, as we saw from the one that I took apart. Now, the one last thing that I want to do, you guys could kind of hear this before, but I'm going to bring this one back up here, and need to dust it, I guess, and going to go ahead and hit this one without the other head on and see how it sounds. You'll notice it's a pretty short sound. It doesn't echo, it doesn't reverberate like it does with both heads on. So it's a very, very different sound. And some drummers will have the bottom head off of their drum because they want that empty short sound, and some drummers will make sure that both heads are definitely on and tuned so that you can get that more echoey sound. So you can completely change the drum sound based on how tight or loose the drum head is and whether or not it has one head or two heads. Obviously you can't play a drum without any heads, because then that would just be like swinging at the air, and that's not going to give us any sound, right? That's just no sound there at all. So that is how you can change the sound of a drum. Now, you can make your own drum at home, and that's something that your teacher is going to talk to you about today. So part of the lesson today is going to be taking a look at how you could make something that acts like a drum, or is kind of a drum, at your house with some common materials that you might have around. So I'm going to go ahead and toss it back to your teacher, and you guys can check out a little bit more about drums and things like drums that make sounds like that you can adjust and mess around with. So have a great lesson, and I will see you guys next time.